Welcome to the Bodacious Women in Cannabis podcast, the show where the bold and brilliant women cannabis business leaders share their journey and their expertise. Here's your host, Susan Burns.
Hi, this is Susan Burns, your podcast host and on-call lawyer and business partner focused on supporting women in cannabis. In this podcast, we are delighted to showcase women in cannabis and, in particular, highlighting their bodaciousness. Today, we're talking with Joyce Gerber, host of the Canna Mom Show, and I can't wait for this conversation. Welcome, Joyce.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm still trying to figure out why I can't hear myself, but I'm fine. I'm good. I'm going to stop obsessing. Hello.
Hi, I can hear you just fine, and I'm sure our audience will be delighted to know all the good things you're going to have to say here today. So I know that because of the name of your show, you have your podcast show, Canna Mom. I know you have a good story to tell us. And so I'm wondering, first of all, how did you ever become interested in cannabis and being public about it?
So thank you, Susan, for inviting me on. I am also an attorney, and when I begin my own story, I often say cannabis is not my natural habitat. I'm a middle-aged woman right now. I've been married 30 years. I have 2 children. They're in their 20s now. I play tennis. I wear pearls. And I definitely grew up in that era where I believed, cannabis was dangerous and killed brain cells. And I also was out, the same generation that we did everything, I got my law degree while also pregnant, proving that a woman's brain and uterus can work at the same time.
And you were probably one of a very few women in law school.
I was, so I graduated in 1998. My son he turned 24 in October. I went to law school when I was 30, which is I had a career before law school, but anyways, cannabis was not really the place. I was not a stoner. I believed all that stuff. So fast forward, and I did consume cannabis, and looking back, I recognize it probably was better for my anxiety because I am a definite type A personality, because you don't go to law school and have a baby and do all that stuff if you aren't. But, when I consumed it, I can see it actually probably calmed me down, but I didn't think that. I really believed it was dangerous. So I'm also one of those women who took time off from the world of monetized work while my children were little, which kind of comes back to my story. Anyway, so 2016, my husband and I go to Denver, Colorado. I call this my cannabis awakening. I live in Massachusetts, just to kind of give context. So 2016, Massachusetts, we had medicinal, but we did not have adult use or retail yet. My husband and I went to Colorado for fun. My kids were teenagers at the time. We did a private tour of the industry with a woman out there named Goldie, who took us around and showed us a dispensary. She brought us to a grow facility. She told us a little bit of the history. And I do call it my cannabis awakening because I realized on that trip that everything I literally knew was wrong. I had no intention of working in cannabis. It was just a thing that I discovered. It was exciting. I'm like, oh my God. So anyways, I came back to Massachusetts. My kids were teenagers. And the joke is that I was like, kids, everything we know about cannabis is wrong. And they were like, yes. But, whatever. I was actually working at the time. I was working in the real world. And 2016, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we were the first state in the New England area to vote to approve retail cannabis in the state in New England. And at the end of 2016, a contract position I was working on ended. This is true. And then in 2017, I couldn't get a job because I was like one of those women who had been in and out of the world of monetized work. I was like, I got pregnant in law school, but I finished anyway. But then I took time off to take care of the children because I don't know if you know this, Susan, but children don't raise themselves. And when they come out of you, there's this expectation that you care for them. Anyway, so I was...
Say it's not true, Joyce.
I know, it's crazy. Anyway, so I was in and out of the world of monetized work, and that was sort of my decision, a choice, which never felt like a choice, which is a whole nother discussion. But 2016, I was doing my thing. My kids were teenagers. I felt like I was back in the professional world. And then I was just really, in 2017, I was having a hard time getting a job. And I go out into the world and I start meeting all these women like me. So I'm 57. Is that true? That's true. And we grew up in the era of Sheryl, Sandberg. We leaned in, we got our degrees. We're Gen Xers. Nobody knows we exist. We did all these things, but a lot of us dropped out. And like, I went to Northeastern University Law School here in Boston. More than half of my law school class were women at the time when I graduated. And Maura Healey, who is now our governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, was one of my classmates. But the truth is, half of us dropped out because we couldn't figure out how to do it all. So that was kind of like where we were. But we're here, we exist. So 2017, I'm meeting all these women kind of like me. They call us relaunchers. There's like literally a word for us because we are relaunching our careers. But what I was finding,
I did not know that.
Relaunchers, yeah. But the problem is that even though we had our degrees and we've been the people running the PTAs and all the things with our executive skill sets, we weren't being paid. So it didn't count in the world of monetized work. So when we went back to get these jobs, it was like, we just weren't good enough. And they kept telling you have to get another degree. You have to it was kind of like a weird space to be in. And it was frustrating. Anyway, so that's a whole nother journey. But I could see that law firms were starting to set up cannabis divisions. So that is really my original idea is I'm like, oh, this is a new law, right? It's a new policy. It's literally being written as I'm thinking about it. I could do this. My brain could handle this. I could learn this as everyone else is. That was sort of my thinking. It didn't turn. Anyway, so that was sort of like that's what I thought I could do getting into cannabis. That's kind of like the beginning. That's not what happened though.
No, but I share your enthusiasm because to me it's like it's so exciting. I was reborn as a lawyer when I started practicing cannabis. It's so fascinating, but I'm not going to nerd out with you here for our audience. But it's just really exciting because it's so brand new. So you ended up not practicing law.
Hey, so I was a family law attorney, which I always say I sucked at. So I am sorry to anyone whose divorces I did. I was just never the meanest person in the room. I did just a lot of things about family law that was just not compatible. And I did actually go into career therapy at some point where I was told I couldn't have designed a job that was worse for my personality than family law attorney, which in some ways made me feel better because I'm like, I wasn't that good at it.
That makes sense.
Anyways, so 2017, 2018 is kind of this weird year in Massachusetts cannabis. And I go out and I just start to learn about it. Like, that's the truth of it. I just started learning about the history. I started learning about the plant. I started to learn about all the misinformation. And I was like, wow, this is weird, And then I started meeting all these people who were getting into the industry. And these women I was meeting were, again, I was a family law attorney. You never talk about love, kindness, goodness, or hope. And these women who are in this industry are healing themselves. Like, that's what I'm seeing around me. And it seems really hopeful and nice. I don't know. It just seemed like an interesting thing. So I'm kind of going through, but I'm not really quite sure where I fit in because I'm not really sure. I want to go back into law. It's, law.
I do.
But I meet somebody who wants to start a media company. And he was starting a cannabis podcast media company. And he hired me to be his executive producer of his cannabis podcast. So that's actually how I got into cannabis podcasting.
Wow. And the rest is history.
Well, and then I was there for a year. I mean, that's what I learned about cannabis. It was like getting an MBA in cannabis because I was bringing on guests every week.
Right. You bring on guests from every different walk of life and you learn more and more and more as you go along.
And you can see, like, my friend, still some of my friends don't believe what I'm doing. They're like, my mother thought I was in a drug cartel till the day she passed. She just couldn't understand it's very hard to change people's hearts and minds. You know that. But I was bringing on every week a different guest. And I started saying, cannabis touches everything from criminal justice to cosmetics. It was like every story. And when we were talking about doing cannabis podcasting, I had friends who were like, are there enough stories? And I'm like, it's everything. It literally touches everything. Like, anyway, so I was the executive producer for a podcast for a year. Then I started the Canna Mom Show at the studio. And the way that's the sort of the genesis of that, it was, so 2019, I was in the studio with a friend. And again, I'm a Canna Mom now, but the Canna Moms are really the women who have been healing themselves and healing their children. More importantly, the Canna Moms, the Canna Mummies who have been using this plant medicine to heal their children against sort of traditional Western medicine advice. And are being very brave because we talked earlier, you can actually still have your children taken away for this. So that's the Canna Mom. That isn't who I am. So when we were thinking about the name of the show, we decided on the Canna Mom Show, like an interview show, like the Daily Show, only we're interviewing Canna Moms. So that was the genesis. I know sometimes it sounds like I'm the Canna Mom. I am not the Canna Mom, but that's the way the show sort of started. And I just started bringing friends on. That was really the beginning. Like when I was a family law attorney, if I sat next to you at like a ball game or something, like watching my kids, and you knew I was a divorce attorney, you would feel free to tell me about your divorce because you figured I understood. So when I started talking about cannabis, everybody had a cannabis story. Everybody was on the pot. I had no idea.
Really?
Yeah, I'm a practicing Jewish person. I go to temple. I have a whole community of the sisterhood. I have some friends in their 70s, and one of them was like, "Oh my God, Joyce, we would have been such good friends in college. I just smoked so much pot. Sometimes I forgot my name."
Oh my gosh, that's unbelievable. This is such a surprise.
Anyways, as soon as you start talking about it, people were opening up. Anyway, so that's how it began, and I started meeting people in the industry. And then 2019, I actually left the media company. And when I left the media company, they said I could take the podcast with me, which I did. And I started over. It was sort of like I called a moment of desperation, isolation, and rejection, because at this point I didn't really have a job. My daughter, my younger child, had just left for college, and I was like kind of getting panicky. But I had this podcast. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, but never underestimate the power of a woman. And I'm like, okay, I'll just start again. So I had a friend who wanted to do it with me. Her name is Amy. We did it for a year together. I did all sort of I trademarked the name. I set up the LLC. She did the social media. We did all the things to get it going. And the one thing I couldn't get is a bank account, which is crazy because I went into this industry to make money, which is sort of a joke now. But I'm an advocate. But I couldn't get a bank account for like 6 months.
Because of the name of your podcast. It just is so interesting to me. And as you said earlier, the misconceptions about cannabis, both marijuana and hemp, it's so interesting, but that seems like kind of a typical thing that happens in this world of business. What would you say, Joyce, is maybe one of the biggest challenges or hurdles or I call them oh shit moments where you feel like, oh my God, what am I doing? Why am I here? What just happened? And then you needed to turn it around, or something that just seemed like such a drag, and then you had a breakthrough and turned it around.
I mean, I will say I've never envisioned myself as an entrepreneur. So this has been an interesting journey just in terms of, I'm a creative person. I'm doing this podcast. I like to write. These are the things I'm sort of engaged in. But this whole becoming a podcast in cannabis has been an entrepreneurial journey where I've been meeting lots of other women, and this is a very hard industry. If people don't understand what it is, people think there's tons of money, which there are, and there is an enormous amount of potential. And the New York Times yesterday, I'm so old fashioned. I literally get the New York Times paper delivered to my house because I like to read it. But my sister and brother keep sending me online articles about cannabis stories in the New York Times before my paper gets there. So this is big business, and they're talking about jobs in cannabis. And so this is an upcoming industry that is existing, but there's still so many roadblocks, and it's so difficult to do things in business. It's not a normal business. You can't get a bank account. You can't deduct your normal business expenses because of a policy decision, 280E. There are all sorts of other minutiae and things. Everything you do in cannabis, I say. So cannabis is like the real world, but a little upside down. And whatever you're going to do in this industry as a business person, you need someone who understands it, a specific industry professional, like a cannabis attorney or a cannabis CPA, because it's not like a normal business right now. It should be. We treat it special, but it shouldn't be, but it is. So that's, I think, the hardest part about the business part. In terms of just meeting everyone and being part of this community, that's giving me purpose. And it's a way to meet women who are leaders, who are healthy, because the women who are staying in this industry use this for health and wellness, and they are evangelized. And they're staying in it. Don't you think that's true?
Yes, I do too. I do. Very creative, exceptionally creative, and yes, health and wellness focus for sure. So you've been doing this on your own for 4 years?
We're in our 4th season right now. Yeah. And we won, so last year we won, I'm out in Boston. Last year we have a big conference out here called NECAN, New England Cannabis Conference. So the Canna Mom Show won Best Podcast of the Year in 2022. That was very exciting. And earlier that year we had won a Best Podcast from the Women in Cannabis Expo. So that was exciting, getting the accolades to feel like, again, I'm a niche little podcast. This is literally my daughter's bedroom that we transformed into a podcast studio. I didn't even go into the whole COVID thing, but but there's women out there. The stories should be of the women who are building this industry. This is a female plant. I talk a lot about caregivers. That's really where kind of my passion is. I feel like I'm a caregiver. This plant is a caregiver. I found it was difficult to keep both my professional and my personal life going at a certain point in my life because people do not validate caregiving in any way, shape, or form. And I think that this industry could be different if we let people build it differently. And that's the dream of elevating the women who maybe, if they could get access to the capital, they could create an industry that maybe takes care of people because this plant takes care of people.
Yes, which is the other part of the whole industry. I mean, to me, the legal aspect was what really drew me in. But then as I started learning more and more and more about the plant and the medical aspects, both of the marijuana derived and the hemp derived, and the differences and all the, all the isomers and terpenes and everything and I mean, it's a miracle plant to me. And so the work that you're doing, Joyce, is so important. I thank you for doing that and supporting women in this industry, especially moms. We had a story in Minnesota, I think it was a couple of years ago, where a mother had been using CBD for her child at the doctor's recommendation, and because they had tried other medication for seizures and they, pharmaceuticals, and they didn't work, and this CBD did, and the school wouldn't let them have it at school. And it's we really need some clear thinking on this subject, based in fact, not in fact and science, not in fear and hypotheticals.
It's again, this is not a belief system, and I understand. Like my sister-in-law is a school nurse. School nurse are mandatory reporters. They can give all these kids all sorts of other medications, but they still are not allowed to give them these products. Which is, again, this is policy. Talking about law, this is literally all policy. You want things to change, you have to be the person whispering in the ears or electing or being the people who are making these policy decisions. And, there are more political organizations out there who are sort of advocating on behalf of the medical part. I do worry that medicinal cannabis is getting lost in this conversation, specifically pediatric medical, which is another conversation together. But I think it should be completely descheduled. I think the scheduling, idea was based on racism. We know the reason why it exists as a Schedule 1. So the idea that the federal government, if they could just get out of the way of this plant for a moment, we could use hemp and rebuild our industry. I always talk about going from, carbon to cannabis. Hemp could do a lot of the things petroleum does. We could get out of our own way and heal ourselves with these CBD medicines, and we can actually use cannabis to get high if we want to, but it's not the only conversation. That's the thing that kind of makes me sad. I feel like we're missing so much.
Yeah, it's really a small part of the conversation.
It's so much bigger. Again, I'm talking more about hemp advocacy. I'm going to be moderating a panel at the NECAN conference in Boston in March on hemp. We're talking a lot about cannabinoids now from hemp. That's really the conversation. But we've also seemed to have built this rivalry between hemp and cannabis, and she's the same plant, only because we've decided that, a cannabinoid, we're so focused on the noids. So, hemp is a miracle plant. We can eat it. We can wear it. We can live in it. It can change your moods. You can do all sorts of things with it. It can take toxins out of the soil. I know this. A lot of people know this, and I don't know why we're not doing anything about it. So I feel like hemp advocacy is really this has to come forward, and we have to stop pitting the cannabis and hemp industry against each other by taking out all these weird cannabinoids and creating other things that the policymakers feel they have to fix. We've created the problem, Delta 8. We've literally created that problem. If they just deschedule cannabis, we wouldn't have a Delta 8 issue.
Right? Yeah. Well, depends on how it's extracted and what they do, but it's it certainly could be managed much better, in my opinion, and from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think so too. Anyways, I think policy. If you really want to help fix this industry, if you want to make this available for medical, for everyone, for health and wellness, that's a lot of a policy work.
I agree. We do need a lot of work at the policy level.
Yeah.
And I think a step forward is I don't know why that antagonism from the marijuana industry and against the hemp industry is so strong. But I mean, I understand what their argument is, but let's work together to make it a great playing field for everybody, in my opinion. Do you have any moments that stand out since you've been doing your Canna Mom Show that are where you just were awed by what was happening? Like, I never in a million years envisioned that this would be happening, and it's so great.
I was not a Canna Mom growing up. I probably should have been. I would have been happier. I was allowed to drink. I could literally yell across my office, "I'm stopping at the Packy before I go to daycare. Anyone want anything?" It would have been like, fine, we're fine. But if I smoked a joint before I picked up my kids, I would have arrested myself. I was a family law. I was working, I would have used this against myself. So I did not understand that. I think the awe is that now it's been very normalized in my own family. During the pandemic, my children were in college and they had to come home. I also had my husband working at home, obviously. I live in a 2-family home and I have a board. One of my son's friends my son's a musician. One of his musician friends was living downstairs. He's from Australia. He still is here. He hasn't left. It was like a sitcom. We had a lot of stuff going on, and I did not know that cannabis. I did not know how important. I did not know cannabis was going to be essential, but I also tried to stockpile it before the kids came home because I thought that was a good idea. We had no toilet paper, but we had flour and tinctures and all sorts of things to keep us calm. And I think the awe was at how well we all got along. Like, we were fine in lockdown for many months here. It was from March until my daughter went back to Arizona in August. That was a pretty long period of time during the pandemic, and that kind of changed our experience with each other. Again, I talk a lot about Canna Moms with like younger kids, like these moms who are completely normalizing it. That's where the magic, like if you start when they're young, it's just a normal thing like anything else. It's when we created this mystery around it and this kind of paranoia and, all the like smoking in the bathroom and spraying yourself with perfume and hoping no one could smell you.
It works so well. Like, nobody can smell vodka on your breath.
It's not healthy. So the whole point of like normalizing it and creating awe of like just that it's starting to normalize. I can see it around me. I can see younger mothers who are kids just know it's just a thing that mom and dad do. It's not anything to be scared of, and it's happening. I think that's the hopeful part.
That's great. And what is it about you, Joyce Gerber, that makes you bodacious? Tell us about your bodaciousness.
I think I'm just persistent. Again, there's no reason for me to exist. No one asked for the Canna Mom Show to exist. It's here. I feel like I'm adding value in the way that I can. I am a certain type of woman. There's a lot of us out there, Gen X women, who went out and did everything. We did everything our brothers did. And then we had kids and we went whatever. We realized that being a caregiver is vital and important. It's really it's almost like, I kind of say this a lot. My mother kind of wanted me to do all these things. She pushed me. She didn't encourage me to be a mom. And I got pregnant in law school by accident, truthfully. But I was 33, so I figured it was a thing I should do. But I was sort of, when I couldn't keep it all together, when I couldn't just, I couldn't work and keep my marriage together and keep my kids alive. I mean, there was a lot of stuff, and I didn't have that much help, and I dropped out. It felt like a personal failing. I mean, that is the truth of it.
Yeah, why can't I do it all?
Why can't I do it all? What is wrong with me? That's what it felt
if
like.
I just get more organized.
Yeah. And it just felt like a personal failing. So I would like to make, I have a wonderful marriage. Children are raised and they've left me, which means I've done a good job. My professional life could have been better, but I can say I've done something no man has ever done. I did finish law school and pass the bar the very first time while creating a person inside of me. So that was a pretty good feat.
Congratulations. And yes, that's an amazing feat.
And then I found this cannabis world, which, I really thought I was going to get rich in as a lawyer, but whatever. It's fine. I've become an advocate, and I really feel like there needs to be a voice like me and you talking about this plant at a very reasonable level. I don't look like what people think a cannabis user looks like. I'm not just, like functioning. I look good. I'm very healthy. I did a 300-mile bike ride in Greece last year with my husband. I feel good, and I'm a daily cannabis user now. And that's the truth of my life. And I don't drink. I think that's actually helping me be healthier, truthfully. So
I agree. Much healthier. I think just because, not to get off into the medical, but the interaction with your system, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to go, oh yeah, that would be healthier. But yes, of course, there are risks and blah, blah. But anyway.
yeah.
Well, I thank you for doing what you're doing. We so need it. And the policy work is as important as you're highlighting Canna Moms and the what is going on and what they face and how can we make that better. So I really appreciate that. And Joyce, and I'm sure our audience will too.
Are there any other things that you would like to add for our listeners before we close?
So if you want to find the Canna Mom Show, you can find us anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast. We're also on our website, the Canna Mom Show. We've spoken to, I think, over 140 episodes at this point. That's a couple hundred women, because sometimes we have 2 women on a show who are working in this industry across the country and around the world. They're all inspiring stories. These are all women who have almost universally healed themselves or healed someone they love, and they recognize the power of this plant, and they want to be in this industry so they can literally become or be the people they needed, because these women are pioneers, and at some point this is going to be completely normalized, and we're going to forget some of the risks these women have taken to heal themselves, because Western medicine was very strongly against it, and not like it's that much better, but it's getting better. People are more open to it, and they're just, again, kind of keep this in context. Cannabis has been part of the human history for over 10,000 years, probably longer, 100 years. 100 years that has been taken out of our system, and it's been wreaking havoc. So we need to bring it back in. We can do it reasonably. We can do it, like grown-ups. We have to stop being afraid of it and, listen to the stories of these women. They're really inspiring, and they'll make you feel good. And, I'm funny, so it's good.